See this? This is my game. Except, it's not really a game. There's no objective, the match never ends, and I don't even have a main menu. Well, I guess I have this, but if you're new here, I'm making a top-down shooter multiplayer mobile game with an emphasis on exciting movement, class creation, and it's Brawl Stars, but better. In this video, I'm going to make my game a real game.
Real boy!
This devlog is packed. I'm talking main menu, leaderboard, loadouts, class creation, AI, music, whatever the this is, and more. And make sure you watch till the end because I've got something exciting to share. I mean, this is just rude, people. So starting with the main menu, I sketched out this layout and I got to work mocking it up in the game. First, I put together a little background using some of the assets from the last video. The background will probably alternate scenes once I have more maps, but for now, it's more desert. I know nobody is tired of the desert yet, right? I had to experiment a lot with the layout before I found something that I was happy with. And as always, finding the right selection of colors was a struggle. It's hard to make things stand out on a background like this, for one. The other issue is making the UI match my cartoony art style without having a rainbow of clashing primary colors or weird transparency that doesn't look right. I tried using a color palette generator like everyone suggests, and it was useless. What was the solution to my conundrum? Gray, and also drop shadows. I basically decided that these blue and gold colors would be my primary colors moving forward, and I would use gray or a transparent black for tertiary buttons. So here's the design I finally settled on. Obviously very inspired by every single mobile game out there, but why reinvent the wheel, you know? The battle button is conveniently located next to the user's thumb. We've got a nice view of our character here, because what else would I put there? And there's some other buttons too. I'm not going to implement the progression system in this video, and much of it is still up in the air, so I won't talk about it much. With that being said, I'd like to design this UI around my future plans. As of right now, the player will earn medals from winning matches, and as they accumulate more medals, they will progress through leagues and unlock more and more items. This button shows your progress, and clicking it will show you all the leagues and what they unlock. These squares here are slots for crates, which you can also earn by winning matches. Inside crates you will get a random selection of PowerPoints / cards, and you'll be able to use these to upgrade your weapons. It's basically the same system that Clash Royale uses. And of course there will be a shop where I put all my juicy microtransactions. But we're not going to worry about that right now. So do I like it?
No.
Okay, fine. I guess it's grown on me. But I still think it looks a little amateur. Guess what will make it look significantly less amateur? Fancy animations. Ooh, ah. I spent a bit of time coding a system for these that makes it really easy to add animated openings to any UI screen. Shout out to LeanTween. That brings us to the loadout screen. You can access this by clicking on the character, and there you go. Very snazzy. This is where you will be able to edit your loadouts. Each loadout has a slot for 2 weapons, a grenade, and a perk. I haven't added perks yet. So we're going to need a way to select the weapons to put into our loadout. As you can see, you can cycle between all the weapon categories up here, and then all the weapons in that category show up below. I only have 3 weapons right now. Slacker. The stats for each weapon are shown off to the right. The scale for the bars looks a little weird right now because the shotgun has so much more damage than the AR and SMG. Once I have more weapons, I'll make the denominator for the bars based on only the weapon category instead of all the weapons. For example, ARs might have a max damage of 30, while shotguns have a max damage of 250. I also made this UI system dynamic like a moderately knowledgeable programmer would do, so anytime I add a weapon, it will automatically show up in the right place. I basically won't have to touch my UI code ever again. Thank goodness. Now on to the actual match. I started by adding a lobby so that people are slightly less bored while they wait for players to join.
Going to reset my internet.
And this was also a good place to add some controls for the server so that they can add bots and start the game when they please. After this, I took a break from UI and worked on updating the networking to work with all the new mechanics I introduced 2 videos ago. This was very painful. If you know how hard it is to get normal code to work, think about writing a script that has to properly interact with multiple copies of itself across different devices with an added time delay. I did get it working though. I also updated my aim indicator so that it doesn't go straight through the environment. I was afraid that doing multiple raycasts every frame would cause a performance hit, but it wasn't an issue. Next up, a match timer and some sort of score display. Pretty happy with how these turned out, especially the smooth bar transitions. Now that we have team scores, it would be nice to be able to see individual scores. So that means it's time to make a leaderboard. This might be my favorite UI element of the video, probably because it took the least amount of time and it just looks so clean. By the way, this mode is team deathmatch, so whichever team gets to 25 kills first wins. You can open the leaderboard in match by tapping the scores. We still need a cool match start sequence. I wanted to show an overview of the map, so I made a cool little camera flyover animation. I also display the newly assigned teams on the right side. By the way, the player is always on the blue team and the red team is always the enemy to avoid confusion. Of course, we've also got an epic countdown before the match begins. Now, let's address the death screen. The instant respawn is a little jarring.
What?
So there's going to be a few seconds delay. I also want to display who the player was killed by and what loadout they were using. There it is. Pretty simple. I had a lot of different ideas for the death message, and I was conflicted between going down the professional route or the funny and sarcastic route, so I decided to randomize the message. Then I came up with a list of 50 options. I'm really glad I decided to do this because it adds some personality to the game, and it makes dying a bit less rage-inducing, because at least you get to see a new quirky message and have a little haha. Either that, or the relentless sarcasm and backhanded remarks finally send you over the edge, causing you to delete the game,
get that off my computer,
and jump out of your window. And finally, I quickly put together this match end screen that tells you if you won or lost, and then takes you to a final leaderboard before allowing you to exit the match. I know this looks really bad, but I felt like I'd have to do some crazy art stuff to make it look epic, and I wasn't really in the mood for that at this point. Don't worry, I'll make it look better later in the video. I had done it! I had finally made a game! There's a score, there's an objective, and you can win or lose. Now it's time to polish things up a bit. Going back to the death screen, I added a loadout button so that you can change your loadout in-game, and I added some invincibility when you respawn to prevent spawn killing. If you haven't noticed, the bots are pretty stupid. They only use the AR, they can't throw grenades or dive, and they don't work as a team. I thought it would be really difficult to come up with a way to make them use all these new features in an intelligent way, but it actually wasn't that difficult. For weapon switching, I came up with a system to score each weapon based on its usefulness in a given situation, and then I simply made the bots use the weapon with the highest score. The score is based on things like the weapon's range, damage, spread, and cooldown. So for example, when an enemy is close, the bot will use the shotgun because it has more damage, but once the shotgun's cooldown gets activated, it will use the AR. Similarly, if the enemy gets too far away, the bot will use the AR because of its longer range. The bots will also switch weapons if the other gun is out of ammo, and when they are not in line of sight of an enemy, they will try to reload both their weapons. This system should work with any weapons that I add in the future, which was a big priority for me. Oh, and the aiming. So previously I added inaccuracy to the bots by picking a random point in a radius around their target and having them aim at that, but this didn't seem very natural. Now the bots pick a random aim target like before, but they smoothly rotate toward that point instead of snapping. This makes their aiming more like a natural sweeping motion, and it rewards diving a bit more because the bots don't have instant reaction time. The bots will throw grenades when there's more than one enemy in sight. The grenade target is determined using the EQS system I talked about a few videos ago. A score is given to a selection of nearby points based on their distance to enemies and line of sight to enemies. Then the point with the best score is chosen. I also added a retreat state so that bots will run away from grenades anytime an enemy grenade is near them. Bots also go into the retreat state when both their guns need to be reloaded. Diving was really simple. I just had the bots dive whenever they could, provided that the distance to their next waypoint was long enough and that they were either in combat or retreating. The bots will also prefer to stay near their teammates. Okay, maybe that's too much teamwork. No. I also made them try to stay as far away from their target as possible while still being in range. This makes them much more difficult to shotgun. Previously, they were kind of sitting ducks. To come up with all these rules, I just translated the decisions I was making in my head to logical conditions that the computer can follow. They aren't nearly as complex as they could be, but honestly, the bots don't need to be that intelligent to seem like real players and to provide a fun challenge. The strategy in my game really isn't that deep. Once the bots could use all the abilities, it was kind of a cluster. So I increased the cooldown timer for the dive and the grenade. I still wanted players to be able to dive twice in a row if needed, so I added counters to the abilities. So it takes 4 seconds for your dive to recharge, but you can have up to 2 dives saved up. I started out allowing the same for grenades, but then I changed it back to a max of 1. Now, I'd like to replace that skull thing that we have going on with something that provides a little bit more information. I'd also like to have stuff like kill streaks and double kills, and I need some way to display all that. This is the design I eventually settled on. Basically, anytime you get some points added to your score, a card like this will pop up. I also wanted some smooth animations, which turned out to be a whole lot of trouble because I couldn't use Unity's built-in layout group. I had to do all the calculations for the position of the card by myself, and because I wanted everything to be centered, it became even more complicated. The struggle was worth it in the end. I did go ahead and add stuff like double kills, assists, and kill streaks as well. Kill streaks are awarded when you get a certain number of eliminations without dying, and double/triple kills are awarded when you chain multiple kills within 3 seconds of each other. I was really trying to get the game ready for preliminary playtesting at this point, and I was realizing just how many little things I wanted to add. Those little things each ended up taking way longer than I anticipated. I added reload indicators so that it's a bit easier to tell when your opponent is reloading, so you can take advantage of their blunder and move in to smite them. I also added health bars over teammates so that you can feel good about swooping in at the last second and saving your friend from bot 3. I added some sound effects for the grenades, footsteps, diving, and countdown as well.
3, 2, 1, fight!
It's time for music. That's right, get pumped. I found this for the menu. I think it slaps, but apparently not everyone thinks so, so I changed it to this. And this is what I picked for the in-game music. I also ended up changing this to something less retro, but I'll save that for the final montage. More fancy animations, and once again, the UI no longer looks amateur. Next, I wanted the grenade kill radius to be a bit more clear. So I started working on generating a mesh in a ring around the grenade like I do with the aim indicators. That's when I thought, there must be a better way. And lo and behold, there was. The sprite shape component was exactly what I had been looking for this whole time. Using that, I got this result, which is pretty awesome, and I didn't even have to deal with triangles and normals and crap. I immediately changed my aim indicator code to work with the sprite shape controller as well, and that meant that I could finally add a black outline to the indicator. Mwah! So much better. Last thing, and this change was very important. Smoke trails. The main reason I added this was because I thought it would look cool. Secondly, I wanted to communicate where the bullets were going a bit more. I think they served that purpose well. Okay, this is really the last detail. When a character dies, I apply a force to their ragdoll in the direction of the bullet so that killing an enemy looks cool and satisfying. That obviously wasn't working properly, so I fixed it. There we go. Now killing an enemy is cool and satisfying. Then it was back to multiplayer mode, where I worked on syncing up the player loadouts. I also noticed that sometimes my shots weren't registering, which is a big no-no. This happens because the enemy's position on the server doesn't match the enemy's position on the client's screen. Lag compensation normally accounts for this, but for some reason it wasn't working. After a lot of trial and error, it seems better now, but I still feel like sometimes my shots don't always register. I'm not sure if I'm doing something wrong or if it's just unrealistic to have perfect lag compensation. It's a lot more clear when your shot doesn't register in a top-down shooter than in an FPS. So it was finally time for preliminary playtesting. I played the game with a couple of friends and they had no problem telling me everything that was wrong with the game and how they wanted me to fix it. Which I guess I was grateful for. The main complaints had to do with the controls. Diving was apparently too confusing because it required 2 steps. Whoa! How was I expecting my players to be able to press the dive button, aim the joystick, and then release the joystick? How stupid of me. To fix this, I implemented their requests and made the dive button immediately trigger a dive in the direction you are moving. I actually ended up liking this control scheme better on mobile. I'm not sure why I didn't do it like this from the beginning. I guess I just assumed players would want to be moving in one direction and then dive in a different direction. I added the option to change the control scheme in the settings. Did I mention I had settings? I also made the joystick snap to wherever you initially touch to make them a bit easier to use. Reloading was previously triggered by tapping anywhere on the screen, and this obviously conflicted with the joystick snapping, so I had to add a reload button instead. I do not like adding buttons and clutter to the screen, but I guess this was necessary. Also, it's apparently weird to tap the shoot joystick to switch weapons, and you should be able to tap the weapons in the corner. So I made it so that you can tap either one. And finally, I realized that the bots were way too difficult because I was used to playing against them on PC, which is obviously a lot easier than mobile. Besides many bugs that I spent weeks fixing, the final thing that I had to fix was performance. I thought the game was actually running really well, getting 55 to 60 FPS on my iPhone 11 Pro. But then I noticed that the camera was making unpleasant jerking motions. Not only that, but after just one match, my phone started to feel like it was going to melt in my hand, and the battery was being drained ridiculously fast. I figured the camera stuttering was because the frame rate was unstable. So, being the idiot that I was, I spent days trying to figure out how to smooth the motion of the camera with late update and time.delta time and rigid body interpolation and cinemachine, before realizing that I should just try to fix the lag spikes instead. Once I finally profiled the game on my mobile device, I realized that there were massive frame drops every couple of frames. I'm talking over 60 FPS down to 30 FPS. Apparently this here meant that my game was GPU bound. These lag spikes are caused by the CPU waiting for the GPU to finish its calculations. Basically, the graphics were the problem. Then I thought, maybe it is a problem that I have 150,000 triangles in my scene even though all my assets are low poly. Maybe I should delete all these hidden faces under my rocks. Maybe I should turn on occlusion culling. Maybe I should separate the outer border into segments so that it works with occlusion culling. Back to the profiler. And it didn't change anything. That's when, in a last, desperate attempt at optimization, I turned off post-processing. Well, the lag spikes are gone. I knew the post-processing wasn't the best for mobile, but I didn't think a little bit of bloom would be that big of an issue. Without bloom, the game looked a lot worse, but the performance hit was just too much to stomach. It wouldn't be bad if it made the game run at a stable 50 FPS, but the lag spikes were a deal breaker. I was able to correct for the lack of bloom by changing the lighting and material colors a bit, but I still don't think the game looks as good as it did before. It's just a little dark and lacking that warm glow that bloom provides. Oh well, sacrifices must be made, and I'll work on it over time. Now I get a stable 60 FPS and the heat issue is much less of a problem. And on my 2020 iPad Pro, I get a stable 120 FPS, which is a massive improvement over the 75 FPS that I was getting before. Let's take one last look at how all this turned out, shall we?
Three, two, one, fight!
Whew, I told you this video was going to be packed, didn't I? I also said that I had a surprise for you, and here it is. One of my main goals for this iteration of the game was preparing it and polishing it up a bit to begin some more widespread playtesting with Apple's Flight Test. So if you want to try the game right now, you can. There's a Discord link with instructions on how to download it in the description. Sorry Android users, this is only available for iOS as of right now. If you download it, I encourage you to leave your feedback and report any bugs that you find in the Discord. Oh, and I'm also looking for a 3D artist to help with the game, so if you're interested, DM me on Instagram. As always, subscribe if you want to stay updated on the game, leave your thoughts in the comments, and follow me on Instagram and TikTok because I might start posting stuff there.